Let me ask you something. You spent good money on an e-bike. Maybe it was $1,000, maybe it was $3,000, maybe it was even more than that, and you felt incredible about it for about 18 months. Then something started feeling off. The range dropped. The motor felt sluggish. And then one day, it just stopped being the bike you bought. Sound familiar? Here's the uncomfortable truth that the e-bike industry does not want sitting at the top of your search results. Most e-bikes are not built to last. And the 2-year mark is where they start telling you the truth. The 2-year curse is real. All right, so before anyone jumps into the comments saying their e-bike is 5 years old and running perfectly, good for you, genuinely, hold on to that thing like it owes you money. But for the vast majority of riders out there, 2 years is where the cracks start showing up. And we are not talking about surface level stuff like a scratched frame or a worn out grip. We are talking about the core systems of the bike beginning to give out. The battery starts losing serious capacity. The motor starts running hotter than it should. The controller, which is basically the brain of the whole operation, starts making decisions that feel a little unhinged, and the rider is left wondering what happened to the bike that felt so smooth and so powerful when it first arrived. Now here's the thing that most people do not realize. The 2-year failure window is not a coincidence. It is actually a reflection of exactly how these bikes are engineered and exactly how they are priced. When a manufacturer builds an e-bike at a low price point, every single component in that bike has been selected with cost in mind first and longevity second, sometimes a very distant second. The battery cells they source are often lower tier, the motor windings are thinner, the waterproofing is minimal, and the electronics are just barely good enough to get the bike working out of the box and looking impressive in a product video. What makes this particularly frustrating is that the 2-year curse lines up almost perfectly with when most entry-level warranties expire. Funny how that works, right? You start experiencing real problems right around the time the manufacturer is no longer legally obligated to care. And most riders chalk it up to bad luck or hard use when actually what happened is completely predictable and in many cases completely avoidable. The industry knows this timeline exists. They just have absolutely no financial incentive to advertise it on the product page. So let us get into exactly what is failing, why it is failing, and what you can do about it. Because there is actually a lot you can do. Starting with the single biggest killer of e-bikes worldwide. The battery is the ticking clock. If you take nothing else away from this video, take this. The battery is not just a component of your e-bike. The battery essentially is your e-bike. Everything that makes an electric bike different from a regular bicycle, the power, the range, the assist levels, all of it runs through that battery pack. And lithium-ion batteries, which is what virtually every e-bike on the market uses, have a lifespan that is measured not in years, but in charge cycles. Now, a charge cycle is one full discharge and recharge of the battery. So if you drain your battery from 100% down to 0 and then charge it back up to 100%, that is one cycle. Most quality lithium-ion cells are rated for somewhere between 500 and 1,000 charge cycles before they start losing meaningful capacity. Budget cells, and this is where it gets important, budget cells often fall significantly below that range in real-world conditions. Here's the math that nobody puts in the product listing. If you ride your e-bike every day and charge it every night, you are burning through roughly 365 charge cycles per year. That means by the end of year 2, you have already put over 700 cycles on a battery that may have only been rated for 500. You do the rest of the arithmetic. The range you had on day 1 is simply not the range you have on day 730. In some cases, riders report losing 30 to 40% of their original range within 18 months of regular use. That is not a malfunction. That is just chemistry doing what chemistry does. The problem is nobody explained the chemistry before you handed over your credit card. But here's where it gets even more interesting, and by interesting I mean slightly infuriating. The battery degradation is not just about the number of cycles, it is also about how those cycles are managed. And this is where the battery management system, which everyone in the industry calls the BMS, becomes the real villain of the story. The BMS is a small circuit board inside your battery pack that controls how the cells charge, how they discharge, and how they protect themselves from dangerous conditions like overheating or overvoltage. A good BMS is genuinely impressive engineering. It balances the individual cells inside the pack so that no single cell gets overworked. It prevents the battery from charging above a safe voltage, and it cuts power before the cells drop below a damaging low voltage threshold. A bad BMS does some of those things, partially, sometimes when it feels like it. Budget e-bikes overwhelmingly use cheap battery management systems because a quality BMS adds cost, and cost is the enemy of a competitive price tag. What this means in practice is that the cells inside your battery are not being properly balanced, they are being slightly overcharged on a regular basis, and they are occasionally being drained deeper than they should be. Every single one of those events accelerates degradation. And most riders have absolutely no idea it is happening because the battery looks fine from the outside. It just keeps getting worse underneath that plastic casing until one day it simply refuses to hold a charge at all. The fix, by the way, is not complicated. Do not charge your battery to 100% every single time if you can avoid it. Keeping it between 20 and 80% dramatically extends cell life. And never, ever store your battery at zero. Lithium-ion cells that sit at zero charge for extended periods suffer something called deep discharge damage that is often irreversible. Store it around 50% if you are not riding for a while. That one habit alone could add years to your battery. The motor nobody talks about. Okay, so the battery gets a lot of attention, and rightfully so. But the motor is quietly responsible for a huge proportion of early e-bike failures, and it gets nowhere near the same level of discussion. Probably because motors are less visible than batteries and harder to explain in a 30-second product video. So let us fix that right now. There are two main types of motors used in e-bikes. You have hub motors, which sit inside either the front or rear wheel, and you have mid-drive motors, which sit in the middle of the frame at the pedal crank. Both have advantages, both have failure modes, and the failure mode for each one is surprisingly different. Hub motors are by far the most common type found on budget and mid-range e-bikes. They are cheaper to manufacture, simpler to install, and they look clean because everything is tucked neatly inside the wheel. The problem with hub motors is heat. When you are climbing a long hill or riding at sustained high speeds, the hub motor generates significant heat, and because it is sealed inside the wheel hub, that heat has very limited ability to escape. Over time, repeated heat cycles degrade the motor windings, the internal magnets, and the bearing surfaces. Riders who live in hilly areas are burning through hub motors considerably faster than riders on flat terrain, and most of them have no idea that their geography is costing them a motor. Mid-drive motors sit at the crank and work with the bike's existing gears, which makes them dramatically more efficient on hills. They also benefit from better airflow around the motor casing, which helps manage heat. This is why you will find mid-drive motors on higher-end e-bikes from brands like Bosch, Shimano, and Bafang. They simply last longer under hard use. The trade-off is cost. Mid-drive motors are more expensive to produce and more complex to service. But if longevity is your priority, they are the smarter choice. Every single time. Now here's the part that genuinely bothers me about the motor conversation. Manufacturers almost never publish real-world failure rate data for their motors. You will see peak wattage numbers. You will see nominal wattage. You will see efficiency ratings. But you will not see anything resembling a mean time between failure figure or a thermal threshold disclosure. That information exists internally. They just prefer you do not have it when you are making a buying decision. And that asymmetry of information is how a lot of riders end up with a dead motor at the 20-month mark and absolutely no idea why. The water problem. Let us talk about water for a minute because this one gets riders in trouble constantly, and it is almost entirely the result of misunderstood marketing language. You will see e-bikes advertised with IP ratings. IP stands for ingress protection, and it is a standardized scale that tells you how resistant a device is to solids and liquids. The most common rating you will see on e-bikes is IPX4 or IP65, and here is where the confusion starts. IPX4 means the bike can handle water splashing from any direction. It does not mean rain, it does not mean puddles, it means a gentle splash. IP65 means it can handle low-pressure water jets from any direction. which sounds impressive until you realize that a heavy downpour can exceed the pressure threshold of IP65 in certain conditions. What none of this means, and this is critical, is that your e-bike is waterproof. Water resistance and waterproof are not the same thing, and the e-bike industry uses them almost interchangeably in marketing materials because it sounds better. Waterproof implies indefinite protection. Water resistant means protected up to a specific and often modest threshold. The real damage happens not in single rain events, but in repeated exposure over months and years. Water finds its way into connectors. It works its way past gaskets that have degraded slightly with age and temperature cycling. It sits in small pockets inside the frame and promotes corrosion on electrical contacts. And because the damage is gradual and invisible, most riders do not connect their riding habits in wet weather to the electrical gremlins that start showing up 12 to 18 months later. Strange power cutouts, erratic display behavior, assist levels that drop unexpectedly. A huge proportion of these issues trace back to water infiltration that happened slowly over hundreds of rides. The takeaway here is not that you should never ride in the rain. Ride in the rain. Just dry the bike properly afterward, pay attention to connector seals, and if you store the bike outdoors, get a decent cover. Because the rain that falls on your e-bike today is absolutely participating in the failure that happens 2 years from now. Cheap components wearing a premium costume. This chapter is the one that is going to make some manufacturers uncomfortable and honestly good. Let us talk about what is actually inside some of these bikes. The e-bike market exploded in popularity right around the early 2020s, and as with any market that grows that fast, a flood of new brands appeared almost overnight. Many of these brands do not actually manufacture anything. They source components from a small number of factories in China, slap their own branding on the frame, build a glossy website, run some influencer partnerships, and position themselves as premium innovative technology companies. And to be absolutely fair, some of those bikes are genuinely good, but a significant number of them are not. And the difference between a good one and a bad one is almost entirely invisible at the point of purchase. The components that fail first on budget e-bikes tend to follow a very predictable order. The display goes first more often than you would expect. Budget displays use cheap connectors and low-quality backlights that fade and fail. Then the throttle or the pedal assist sensor starts misbehaving. These are small components, but they are in constant mechanical use, and budget versions wear out fast. Then the brake levers and brake sensors, which cut motor power when you brake, start causing issues. And then you start getting into more serious territory with the controller, which is essentially the motherboard of the e-bike, beginning to show faults. The frame itself is usually the last thing to go because frames are simple and relatively cheap to make well. But the irony is that by the time the frame is the only thing left in decent shape, everything else that makes the bike an e-bike has either failed or is on its way out. The best way to protect yourself from this before you buy is to look for brands that publish the specific component manufacturers they use. If a brand tells you they use a Shimano drivetrain, a Samsung or LG battery cell, and a Bafang motor, that is a good sign because those are traceable, reputable components with documented performance histories. If a brand just says high-performance motor and advanced battery technology without naming anybody, that ambiguity is not accidental. The maintenance myth. Here is something the industry almost universally fails to communicate at the point of sale. E-bikes need maintenance. Not just chain lube and tire pressure, which, yes, absolutely do those things, but real electrical and mechanical maintenance on a schedule. And the vast majority of riders are not doing it because nobody told them they needed to. Let us start with the basics that everybody skips: connectors. Every electrical connection on your e-bike, and there are more of them than you think, should be inspected periodically for corrosion, looseness, and moisture. A loose connector creates resistance. Resistance creates heat. Heat degrades the connector further. And eventually, that degraded connector causes intermittent power issues that are genuinely maddening to diagnose. Cleaning connectors with electrical contact cleaner and ensuring they are properly seated takes about 15 minutes and can prevent a shocking number of electrical failures. Torque checks are another one that almost nobody does. E-bikes vibrate significantly during normal use, and that vibration works bolts loose over time. motor mounting bolts, display bracket bolts, brake caliper bolts. If any of these get loose enough, the consequences range from annoying to genuinely dangerous. A 5-minute torque check every couple of months prevents all of it. Then there is the brake system, which on an e-bike is more important than on a regular bicycle, precisely because you are going faster and you weigh more with the battery and motor on board. Brake pads wear faster on e-bikes than on regular bikes. Hydraulic brake fluid absorbs moisture over time and needs replacing. Cable tension on mechanical brakes drifts with use. None of this is complicated maintenance, but it is maintenance that an alarming number of e-bike owners simply never think about because the bike came to them fully assembled, worked perfectly on day one, and gave no indication that anything would ever need attention. The honest truth is that an e-bike maintained properly is a genuinely different machine from the same model that was never touched after unboxing. The maintained bike rides better, lasts longer, and gives its owner far fewer catastrophic surprises. The unmaintained bike is the one that dies in year 2 and ends up in a video exactly like this one. What brands don't want you to know about warranties. Warranties on e-bikes look very reassuring on paper. 2 years on the frame, 1 year on electrical components, 6 months on the battery. Sounds comprehensive, right? Let us look at what those warranties actually mean when you try to use them. First, almost every e-bike warranty in existence has a clause that voids coverage for damage caused by water ingress, which, as we just spent an entire chapter establishing, is one of the primary ways e-bikes fail. So the thing most likely to kill your bike is also the thing most likely to be excluded from your warranty coverage. That is not a coincidence. That is legal protection for the manufacturer written into a document most buyers never fully read before purchase. Second, most warranties require that the bike be serviced at an authorized dealer or service center. For large established brands, this is reasonable because authorized service centers exist in most major cities. For smaller or newer e-bike brands, this requirement can be functionally impossible to satisfy because there is no authorized service center anywhere near you. The warranty is technically valid, it is just practically unusable. Third, and this one is particularly sneaky, some warranties specify that any modification to the bike, including changing the tires, adding aftermarket accessories, or adjusting settings through the display, constitutes unauthorized modification and voids the warranty. The definition of modification in some of these documents is broad enough to cover things that any reasonable person would consider normal customization. Getting warranty support from smaller e-bike brands can be a genuinely exhausting experience. Long email chains, requests for extensive documentation, requests for video evidence of the fault, shipping requirements that put the cost of return on the buyer. This is not true of every brand, and some companies have genuinely excellent warranty support. But the ones that do tend to be the more established brands that have built reputations over years and understand that customer experience is part of their long-term value. The ones that make it difficult tend to be the newer brands that are optimizing for the sale rather than the relationship. Read the warranty before you buy, not after. How to actually make your e-bike last all right. Enough about what goes wrong. Let us talk about what you can actually do to push your e-bike well past that 2-year cliff and keep it performing like it should for 4, 5, 6 years or longer, because it absolutely is possible and it does not require an engineering degree or a dedicated workshop. Number 1 is battery management, and we already covered a lot of this, but it bears repeating because it is that important. Charge to 80% for regular use. Charge to 100% occasionally when you need full range. Never store the battery at 0. Keep the battery away from extreme heat and extreme cold because both temperatures accelerate cell degradation in ways that are permanent and cumulative. If you live somewhere with very cold winters and you store your bike in an unheated garage, bring the battery inside during the coldest months. That single habit can meaningfully extend its usable life. Number 2 is to learn your connectors. Find every electrical connector on your bike, look up a basic tutorial for your specific model, and do a simple inspection every 3 to 4 months. You're looking for green or white corrosion, looseness, and any sign of moisture. Clean what needs cleaning. Reseat what has come loose. This takes less time than an episode of your favorite show, and it prevents an outsized number of electrical failures. Number 3 is to protect the bike from sustained water exposure. Riding in light rain is fine. Riding through standing water repeatedly, storing the bike outdoors uncovered in a wet climate, or pressure washing the bike directly is where the damage accumulates. Dry the bike after wet rides. Pay particular attention to the area around the display, the motor connector, and the battery port. Number 4 is to buy from brands that have genuine service infrastructure. This is a buying decision rather than a maintenance habit, but it belongs here because it dramatically affects the long-term ownership experience. A brand with a local dealer network, documented service procedures, and a track record of honoring warranty claims is worth paying more for upfront. The savings on a cheaper brand evaporate completely the moment you need support and cannot get it. Number 5 is to treat firmware updates seriously. Many modern e-bikes receive software updates that improve motor efficiency, battery management, and system diagnostics. These updates exist for a reason, and ignoring them is leaving improvements on the table. Check your brand's app or website periodically and install updates when they are available. And number 6, honestly, the most underrated thing on this entire list is to actually ride the bike regularly. Lithium-ion batteries that sit unused for months degrade faster than batteries that are being used and maintained at a reasonable charge level. E-bikes that sit in garages without being touched for extended periods accumulate more problems than bikes that are used consistently. The best thing you can do for your e-bike is ride it, which, when you think about it, is a pretty great excuse. So here's where we land. E-bikes are not fragile machines by nature. The technology is genuinely capable of lasting many years with proper understanding and proper care. The 2-year failure window that so many riders experience is not inevitable. It is the predictable result of cheap components, inadequate battery management, zero maintenance culture, and warranty structures designed to protect manufacturers more than consumers. The e-bike industry is still relatively young, and it is still sorting itself out in terms of quality standards, service infrastructure, and honest communication with buyers. Some brands are doing this exceptionally well. A lot of brands are not there yet. Your job as a buyer is to ask harder questions before you purchase, read the warranty in full before you commit, and treat your e-bike like the sophisticated piece of electrical and mechanical engineering that it actually is. Because here's the bottom line. A well-chosen, well-maintained e-bike is one of the genuinely great inventions of the last 20 years. It changes how people move through cities, it saves serious money over time, and it makes the daily commute something you might actually look forward to. That is worth protecting. If this video helped you understand what is actually happening inside your e-bike, do us a favor and hit the like button because it genuinely helps more people find this information before they make a purchase they regret. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of deep dive because we are just getting started. And drop a comment below telling us what year your e-bike started giving you trouble because we have a feeling the 2-year pattern is going to show up in those comments more than a few times. See you in the next one.